In the opening moments of our narrative, we are introduced to the formidable figure at its center, a man named Ming, who presides over a vast and powerful corporate empire. His demeanor is characterized by a profound emotional detachment, which manifests as arrogance and a dismissive rudeness toward nearly everyone he encounters. His influence is considerable. Though he was once a university professor, his impact extends far beyond the lecture hall, casting a long shadow over both his former students and the business associates who now populate his world. A palpable sense of fear precedes him, as evidenced by the frantic preparations unfolding at a luxury hotel. The manager, upon receiving news that the VIP guest, Mr. Ming, is imminent, is thrown into a state of nervous excitement, mobilizing his entire staff to ensure every detail is perfect for his arrival. Our story then shifts to introduce the female protagonist, a young woman named Lee. She is the daughter of a successful businessman, but her relationship with her father is deeply fractured. For years, she believed her mother was merely his mistress, as he never formalized their union through marriage. This perceived betrayal has filled Lee with a lasting resentment, and she has severed communication with him entirely. She was raised by her mother in a modest, tranquil home where she was cherished and supported. From a young age, Lee harbored an ambitious dream: to ascend through her own merit and hard work to become the chief executive officer of a major company. However, reality has tempered this aspiration. She currently works as an assistant to a friend named Lu Fan, a man she treats like a brother and who relies on her abilities implicitly. In many ways, Lu Fan's enterprise would falter without Lee's diligent support. Lee carries a specific and bitter grudge from her past. She squarely blames a particular professor for a pivotal failure. When her mother fell gravely ill, Lee prioritized her care, leading her to miss her final examinations. She pleaded repeatedly with this professor for a chance to sit for a supplemental test, but he, known for his inflexible and harsh nature, refused her request. Her mother subsequently passed away, and Lee has never forgiven that professor, holding him personally responsible for derailing her academic and professional trajectory. Fate begins to weave its threads as both parties converge at the same hotel. Lee and Lu Fan are there to pitch to potential investors, while Ming has arrived for undisclosed business. In the bustling lobby, their paths cross without recognition. Ming later intrudes upon the investors' meeting Lee is attending, and with cold analytical precision he proceeds to dismantle their project proposal, pointing out numerous critical flaws. Lee watches in despair, convinced the investment is now lost. To compound her frustration, she had earlier inadvertently exchanged coffee orders with this arrogant man at the counter, and now his dismissive behavior reminds her painfully of the professor she detests. Overwhelmed, Lu Fan departs, leaving Lee to manage the disastrous aftermath alone. Feeling defeated, Lee turns to her best friend Yu, as she always does when in crisis. Over the phone, she vents her frustration. "That cold-hearted professor from university has somehow reappeared to ruin my life again. What should I do?" Yu, ever pragmatic and slightly mischievous, devises a plan. Make him disappear for a couple of days. Create a distraction, and once you have the chance, complete your work. That should save the situation. Lee, desperate, decides to follow this advice literally. Yu instructs her to tail Ming's car, and Lee, though apprehensive, complies. Ming, a man perpetually alert to threats, soon senses he's being followed. He pulls his car over to investigate but sees nothing conclusive and resumes his journey. This moment of distraction proves catastrophic. As he drives away, a large truck swerves and collides with his vehicle in a horrifying, deliberate impact. Lee, a witness to the violent crash, is horrified. Despite her animosity toward him, her innate compassion overrides everything else. She rushes to the wreckage to aid the injured man before he is rushed to the hospital via ambulance. Parallel to this drama, we see Lu Fan confronting his ex-girlfriend and her new partner, who are speaking derisively about him. A physical altercation ensues, leaving Lu Fan injured. At the hospital, a doctor delivers a grave prognosis to Lee regarding Ming. While his physical injuries will heal, he has sustained significant trauma to the brain. The likely consequence is retrograde amnesia, a complete loss of memory. Lee, feeling a sense of responsibility, stays by his bedside through the night. The next morning, her vigil is met with confusion. Ming's eyes open, filled with disorientation and fear. "Who am I?" he asks, confirming the doctor's prediction. A startling realization dawns on Lee, and for a fleeting moment, an almost imperceptible, cunning smile touches her lips. Here lies an unprecedented opportunity. As he repeatedly questions his identity, she provides only a name, his own, and withholds everything else. Then she fabricates a new reality. "I am your fiancé," she declares, weaving a tale of their romantic engagement and feigning emotional distress over his accident. With no memories to contradict her, Ming has no choice but to accept her story as truth. Meanwhile, Ming's loyal manager is in a panic over his boss's sudden disappearance. Remembering Ming's precise instructions, he opens a sealed envelope left for such a contingency. The note inside is chillingly prescient. Ming had anticipated an attack. Instead of filing a missing person report, the manager is directed to search local hospitals. A flashback reveals why. Ming's business partner, a man named Hao, is his polar opposite, ruthlessly greedy and unscrupulous. A fierce argument between them had led Ming to suspect Hao might attempt to eliminate him, prompting this precaution. At the hospital, police arrive to investigate the accident. Lee, steadfast in her role as the fiancée, is taken to the station for questioning. There she encounters Lu Fan, who has also been brought in following his street brawl. Lee negotiates with an officer, discreetly offering a bribe in exchange for the CCTV footage from the accident site and a swift end to the inquiry. As she leaves, her attention is caught by Lu Fan's situation. Learning the details of his fight, she intervenes, mediating a tense reconciliation between the parties before formal charges can be filed. The plot thickens elsewhere. The truck driver from the accident is visited by a mysterious, menacing stranger. Upon learning that Ming survived the crash, the stranger coldly executes the driver to eliminate a loose end. The identity of the person who ordered Ming's assassination remains shrouded, but the threat is vividly clear. Back at the hospital, Lee observes a transformed Ming. Gone is the arrogant tycoon, in his place is a vulnerable man trying to drink juice with an almost childlike clumsiness. Lee cannot help but smile at the stark contrast. Ming, seeking to reconstruct his life, asks about their history. Lee spins an elaborate web of falsehoods, describing a whirlwind romance where he, as her professor, pursued her, only to become cold and demanding later. Trapped by his amnesia, Ming accepts this narrative, feeling a confused sense of guilt for his alleged past behavior. The danger, however, has not passed. The same stranger locates the hospital. When Lee hears commotion from a room and discovers it was Ming, though he was elsewhere and unharmed, a roommate was attacked, her protective instincts ignite. Realizing he is still a target, she decides he cannot remain in the open. She books a secluded hotel suite, intending to hide him there. In a separate encounter, Ming's manager crosses paths with the sinister stranger. Spotting suspicious documents, the manager attempts to enlist his help to find Ming, only to be violently assaulted. At the hotel, Lee helps Ming change his clothes, using his injured arm as a pretext. In the close proximity, a strange tension arises. Ming, believing her to be his beloved, looks at her with growing affection. The injured manager, now hospitalized himself, is immobilized but determined. The stranger, furious to learn his hospital victim was not Ming, redoubles his efforts to find and finish the job, fearing his own employer's wrath. Lee successfully spirits Ming away from the hospital in a private taxi. At the hotel, she spots Lu Fan in the lobby and desperately tries to conceal Ming, wanting to avoid any complicated explanations. She has booked a lavishly decorated suite, presented as a romantic retreat, which embarrasses her despite the deception. She gives Ming a dedicated phone for emergencies, all while privately intending to eventually leave him there and extricate herself from the situation. Lu Fan, having repeatedly tried to contact her, is baffled by her disappearance. Lee avoids mentioning Ming. Alone in the suite, Ming experiences traumatic flashbacks of the accident and fragmented memories of his childhood, the car crash that killed his parents and left him in the care of an uncle, events that shaped his emotionally closed-off adult self. Meanwhile, Lee accesses his phone, deletes all personal data, and performs a factory reset, severing his last tangible links to his identity. She justifies this as a necessary measure for her own safety. The mastermind behind the attacks is revealed to be Ming's own partner, Mr. Hao, who is growing anxious for confirmation of Ming's death. When Lee returns to the room with food, she finds Lu Fan waiting outside, wanting to share a drink. She refuses curtly, fueling his suspicion that she is secretly involved with someone. Lee then returns Ming's sanitized phone, complete with photoshopped images of them as a couple, further cementing her fiction in his mind. He asks again for the story of their meeting, and Lee embellishes her tale of a professor-student romance that soured, performing so convincingly that Ming is moved to pity. Her deception holds. Later, while showing him the suite, Lee slips and falls toward him. They catch each other, their faces close, hearts racing. She quickly pulls away, flustered. In another setting, Mr. Hao is seen with Ming's former fiancée, Tae. Hao harbors feelings for her and wants her to forget Ming, but her lingering attachment frustrates him. The hired killer, meanwhile, strong-arms a hacker into tracking Ming's location. The sleeping arrangement in the suite forces an awkward intimacy. Lee must share the bed with Ming, who instinctively moves closer. She endures it, bound by her own fabricated role. The next day at the hotel restaurant, she again spots Lu Fan and engages in a frantic game of hide-and-seek with Ming to avoid detection. Ming's manager, having recovered slightly and received Lee's anonymous tip about Ming's location, heads to the hotel. The killer also closes in. Lee, hiding from the killer, witnesses a brief interaction between the killer and Ming's manager. She misinterprets this, suspecting a conspiracy between them. She decides she cannot leave Ming unprotected and messages her stepbrother Li Chain to prepare her old house for occupancy. Ming, having overheard hotel staff mention his original room booking, confronts Li about why they had separate rooms initially. She launches into a NOTHER Chinese letter acting proficient performance, tearfully claiming they were meant to be on their honeymoon before a terrible fight led him to book a separate room. Ming, consumed by guilt over this imagined transgression, apologizes profusely. In a subplot, Li's best friend Yu has taken a job as Lu Fan's assistant at Li's suggestion. Soon after, Li takes Ming to a shopping mall. When she sees Ming's manager, she again tries to hide, reinforcing her mistaken belief in his villainy. Ming, observing a kissing couple nearby, misreads Li's frantic behavior as a desire for intimacy. He abruptly sets their shopping bags down and kisses her. Shocked, Li pushes him away. Her stepbrother calls to confirm the house is ready, and after much effort, she brings Ming to her childhood home, which has been staged to look like a couple's residence. As she retrieves food from the refrigerator, another near accident brings them into close contact. She hastily suggests going out to eat instead. At the restaurant, Ming insists on taking couple photographs, which they do. Elsewhere, Li's father expresses worry over his estranged daughter's whereabouts. Mr. Hao presses Ming's manager for information on whether Ming is alive, but the manager knows nothing. After dinner, Li and Ming go grocery shopping. There, Li spots an old teacher and tries to hide. Ming, confused, encourages her to simply say hello. The teacher, however, has already seen them and assumes they are a married couple. She enthusiastically offers them marital advice and suggests items for their home, forcing them to maintain their charade. After a hasty escape, they find solace in a park. In this quieter moment, their bond deepens. Li shares genuine childhood memories of visiting the park with her mother. Ming, touched, again apologizes for the pain his past self supposedly caused her. At home, Ming discovers an old love letter, seemingly written by Li to her professor. A flashback reveals the truth. A friend had dared Li to write it, and it had been delivered to the professor, who then publicly humiliated her. Now, when Ming asks about it, Li is forced to perpetuate the lie, claiming it was a sincere declaration that once made him happy. Her best friend Yu and stepbrother Li Chain arrive for a visit. To avoid them, Li tells Ming they are debt collectors, and she hides until they leave. We learn that Yu secretly harbors feelings for Li Chain but has never confessed. In an attempt to understand his new life, Ming begins making a list of Li's likes and dislikes. Lu Fan is shown being bossed around by his sister, a dynamic he tolerates with weary amusement. Ming, in a genuinely endearing turn, searches the internet for how to be a good boyfriend. Meanwhile, in the business world, Mr. Hao is shown in a tense meeting with a rival company. A major confrontation erupts between him and Li over this betrayal of Ming's interests, though Ming, of course, is unaware. When Li returns home, emotionally drained from the conflict, Ming eagerly tries to cheer her up with his newfound romantic gestures. Overwhelmed and burdened by her lies and the real-world danger, she reacts with unexpected anger, pushing him away and retreating into her conflicted thoughts. The carefully constructed facade is beginning to strain under the weight of reality, danger, and her own unresolved feelings. The following morning, Li awoke to a surprising and touching sight. A carefully prepared breakfast, arranged with evident effort, awaited her. Ming stood nearby, a tentative smile on his face, having orchestrated this gesture with his own hands. A genuine warmth spread through Li, momentarily displacing the tangled web of deception and anxiety that had become her life. This peaceful moment was interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Upon answering, Ming found himself face-to-face with Li's best friend, Yu, who had arrived for an unexpected visit. Yu's eyes widened in sheer astonishment at the sight of the formidable Ming casually present in Li's home. Before any awkward explanations could be attempted, Li swiftly guided Yu outside. Once alone, Yu immediately began to tease and interrogate her friend. "You must explain everything this instant. What is the meaning of him being here? What is truly happening between you two?" Under pressure, Li abandoned pretense with her confidant. She revealed the core truth. "It is not what you imagine. The man has lost all memory of his past life. I'm merely providing him shelter and assistance. There is nothing more to it than that." While this clarified the situation for Yu, it did little to simplify the complexities ahead. Back inside, Ming's curiosity was piqued by a file he discovered, which contained information about the university where he had once been a professor. This revelation sparked a determination within him to visit the campus, hoping the familiar environment might trigger some recollection of his identity. In a parallel narrative, the subplot involving Li's stepbrother, Li Chain, and Lu Fan's sister, Gin, continued. Though no romantic spark existed between them, their families were adamant about arranging a marriage. forcing both into a charade of toleration for the sake of familial harmony. Meanwhile, Lu Fan had resolved to apply himself seriously to a business meeting, but his efforts culminated in a literal pratfall, undermining his attempts at professionalism. At the university, Ming's quest for self-knowledge proved humiliating. When he approached former colleagues and staff, inquiring about the man he used to be, he was met not with answers but with disbelief and mockery. The cold, imposing Professor Ming they remembered bore no resemblance to this confused, gentle man asking naive questions. Just as the situation grew most uncomfortable, a passing faculty member recognized him. "Professor Ming, what a surprise to see you here," she exclaimed. This public identification caused a stir, drawing a crowd of curious onlookers. Ming, flustered, caught sight of his own photograph on a departmental wall, a stark reminder of a life he could not recall. Li, having learned of his impulsive trip, rushed to the campus, driven by a dual motive: to rescue him from an awkward scene and, more pressingly, to prevent any exposure that might restore his memory and unravel her lies. With Yu's help via a getaway car, she extracted Ming from the growing crowd and brought him home. Back in the safety of the house, Yu noticed the fabricated couple photos. Her surprise was evident. "When did this happen?" she whispered to Li, who could only offer evasive answers. Yu realized the immense burden her friend was carrying, the endless cascade of lies required to maintain the fragile fiction, all while genuine danger lurked in the shadows, a threat Li could scarcely explain to anyone. In another part of the city, Mr. Hao, growing increasingly impatient, had taken Ming's manager captive. In a tense interrogation, he attempted to extract information on Ming's whereabouts. The manager, truly ignorant, could offer nothing. Hao then tried a different tactic, plying the man with alcohol in the hope of loosening his tongue. The plan backfired spectacularly, as Hao himself succumbed to intoxication, leaving the manager to deal with his incoherent captor. At home, Ming sought honesty from Yu. "Please tell me what I was like as a professor. How did I treat Li?" Yu, bound by loyalty to her friend but also by a thread of pity for the amnesiac man, offered a stark truth. "You were terrible. You criticized her constantly, showed her no kindness." This confession devastated Ming, deepening his sense of guilt over his imagined past transgressions. Determined to atone, he redoubled his efforts to be helpful and kind, his behavior a complete inversion of his former self. Li, though maintaining her guard, found herself disarmed by his sincere attentiveness. The next day, a hungover Mr. Hao, while out driving, caught a fleeting glimpse of Ming on the street. By the time he processed the sight and stopped his car, Ming had vanished into the crowd. Hao dismissed it as a drunken hallucination. Meanwhile, on a public bus, Ming observed a couple in the midst of a heated argument. Their quarrel dissolved, however, into a reconciling kiss. This simple public display lodged itself in his mind as a potential solution to discord. Li awoke one morning feeling a rare sense of lightness, having risen before Ming. This small victory was short-lived. Ming returned from an errand and, recalling the bus couple, suddenly moved to kiss her, hoping to resolve any unspoken tension between them. Li was utterly shocked. Her heart raced with a confusing mixture of alarm and something else she refused to name. She fled the room, baffled by his behavior and her own reaction. Unbeknownst to her, her father, concerned for his estranged daughter, had hired men to surveil her. They soon delivered photographs of Li and Ming together. The sight filled her father with fury and suspicion. "What is that man doing with my daughter?" he demanded to know. The forced courtship between Gin and Li Chain continued, requiring them to perform as a happy couple for their families. This shared act of pretense, ironically, began to forge a genuine, if begrudging, bond between them. Elsewhere, Yu playfully meted out punishment to Lu Fan for his various blunders, much to his comic despair. Mr. Hao, meanwhile, grew more confident each day Ming remained missing, convincing himself his rival was dead. His companion Tia, however, harbored doubts, haunted by the brief glimpse of a man who looked exactly like Ming. In a dramatic turn, Ming's younger brother, a figure from his forgotten life, tracked down and kidnapped the manager, demanding to know his brother's location. The manager, truly in the dark, could provide no answers. The two unlikely allies then decided to join forces to find Ming. Li, trusting Yu completely, confided the depth of the mystery. She had no idea who was behind the attacks on Ming, but she was determined to find out. "I can't let him go now," she explained. "His life is in danger, and his memory hasn't returned." At home, Li tried to administer a dose of bitter medicine to Ming. He refused, leading to a playful struggle that ended with them in close proximity. In the tussle, Ming accidentally drank the medicine. The game Li used, however, stirred a deep sadness in her. It was one she used to play with her late mother. Later, as Li left for work, Ming called after her, saying she'd forgotten something. She ignored him, preoccupied. At the office, Yu had a hostile encounter with a woman who was leaking company secrets to a rival firm. Li intervened and, in the process, tripped and injured her leg. Ming, who had followed her and overheard the confrontation, later tended to her wound with a gentle, caring touch. This simple act of kindness resonated deeply with Lee. She felt herself slipping further into feelings she knew were perilous. Unaware, her father's spy photographed this intimate moment, fueling the father's rage and determination to investigate. Yu began to tease Lee relentlessly, her intuition suggesting her friend's feelings were evolving beyond mere caretaking. In a separate subplot, a woman named Kay was introduced, gazing lovingly at a photograph. Her affection was not for a contemporary but for Ming. After her grandfather's death, Ming had been her sole protector and she had loved him deeply, though their relationship had ended for reasons yet unknown. Lee and Yu continued their amateur investigation into the truck driver and the attack, but hit dead ends. Ming, eager to please, prepared an elaborate meal for Lee, only to be disappointed when she messaged to say she couldn't make it. At the office, Yu gave Lee playful advice on how to flirt with Ming, a conversation overheard by a bewildered Lu Fan. Later, Yu followed Lee to a meeting with Lee Chain, and eavesdropping, discovered to her heartbreak that he was engaged to marry Lu Fan's sister. Lu Fan discovered Yu's feelings and bluntly advised her to forget Lee Chain, leading to an argument that resulted in both of them tumbling into a water feature. Soaked and stranded, they were forced to share a hotel room for the night, their bickering unabated. That same evening, Ming returned home in a drunken state, clinging to Lee for support. Worried she cared for him, a gesture that blurred the lines between responsibility and affection. The next day, Lee's father arrived for a confrontation. Finding only Ming at home, he unleashed his anger, demanding to know the nature of their relationship. Ming, confused and still without memory, could offer no defense. Lee rushed home upon receiving Ming's message and faced her father's interrogation. He pleaded for honesty, professing a desire for her happiness, but Lee, still hardened by years of resentment, ordered him to stop interfering in her life. He left, shooting a venomous glare at Ming and vowing further inquiry. Ming's brother and the manager, now a detective duo, pursued a lead on Ming's location. Meanwhile, Lee and Ming visited a lively fairground. Spotting the manager in the crowd, Lee, still mistakenly believing him to be allied with the attackers, panicked and hid Ming once more, successfully evading him. Lu Fan faced his own pressures, receiving a stern lecture from his father about his professional failures. Later, when Lee briefly stepped away at the fair, she returned to find Ming missing. A wave of sheer terror washed over her. Had the killers found him? He reappeared moments later, having gone to fetch her a gift. Overwhelmed with relief, she hugged him tightly, a moment that crystallized for both the audience and herself the depth of her feelings. That evening, Ming orchestrated a romantic surprise, filling the house with candles. In the soft light, he encouraged Lee to talk about her parents. She shared the painful truth about her father never marrying her mother. Ming, with his new gentle demeanor, listened and made her laugh, lifting her spirits. The next day, both Yu and Lu Fan came to visit. Lu Fan was stunned to see Ming. Yu and Lee quickly ushered the men aside, claiming they were late for a party. Ming wanted to join, but they insisted he stay, leaving him dejected. He decided to follow them. At the party, the group was discussing Ming when he suddenly appeared, having found his way in. To everyone's shock, he introduced himself as Lee's boyfriend. The room fell into a stunned silence before erupting with questions. Lee, terrified this exposure would trigger his memory or unravel her lies, hastily dragged him away, instructing Yu to manage the fallout. She took him onto a nearly empty late-night bus. In the semi-privacy, they shared a moment of uncomplicated joy. Seizing the romantic atmosphere, Ming kissed her. But the contact triggered a violent flashback, images of his accident, the screeching tires, the impact. He recoiled in fear, leaving Lee bewildered. As they walked home in a sudden rain shower, taking shelter, the romantic ambience returned. He kissed her again, and again the kiss was aborted by traumatic memories. He confessed to her, "Whenever I kiss you, I remember fragments. Perhaps if I kiss you again, it will all return." Lee, now terrified of the man he might become, could not allow it. Mr. Hao, through his network, finally acquired a photo of Ming with Lee. Jealousy and fury consumed him. He ordered a detective to compile a full dossier on the unknown woman. Meanwhile, Ming took Lee on a proper date to the theater and a couple's event. At the event, they participated in an exercise where they had to write down each other's qualities. Reading Ming's heartfelt words about her, Lee was profoundly moved, embracing him emotionally. Simultaneously, Ming's brother finally pinpointed his location. Tragedy struck during a simple shopping trip. Ming realized he was being followed. In a panic, he ran, slipping on a staircase and suffering a severe fall. He awoke in a hospital bed, his manager by his side. The head injury from the fall had a cruel, inverse effect. It restored his original memories but erased the entire period of his amnesia. The gentle, caring Ming was gone, replaced once more by the cold, emotionless tycoon. At his company, rumors swirled about his prolonged absence. Just as Mr. Hao was entertaining the idea that Ming was permanently gone, he received a message confirming Ming's return. Paralyzed with fear, Hao made a hasty exit. Minutes later, Ming himself strode into the office, his demeanor icy and authoritative. He immediately took charge, assuring his worried staff and vowing to investigate the attack on his life. His brother was overcome with emotion upon their reunion. Lee, however, was desolate, searching everywhere for the Ming who had disappeared. Her search ended when she saw him leaving his corporate headquarters. She ran to him, but he looked straight through her, his eyes devoid of recognition or warmth. He spoke to her with the same rude dismissal she remembered from their professor-student days. Heartbroken, she told him they would not meet again and walked away. Ming then arranged a meeting with Lee's father, presenting a business proposal for collaboration. Her father, distrustful and angry, flatly refused. Tia, armed with the detective's report on Lee, studied the information with intense interest. At home, Ming's brother and manager observed subtle changes in him, flickers of the kindness he had learned with Lee. But the dominant persona was once again the ruthless businessman. Tia, hoping to rekindle their old relationship, found him distant. His thoughts were inexplicably occupied by the image of Lee. Mr. Hao, now a fugitive within his own life, dreaded the impending investigation. Lee learned that a new investor was joining her company. To her shock and anger, it was Ming. He had not only invested but had specifically requested her as his personal assistant for the project. Powerless to refuse, she fumed as he calmly stated his intention. "I have to make you pay for what you did to me." During a critical meeting, the lights suddenly went out and the doors locked, trapping Lee and Ming together in the dark. As the other meeting attendees panicked outside, the two were forced to cooperate to escape, a tense echo of their former dependency. They eventually freed themselves and rejoined the meeting. For the manager, Ming's return was a cause for pure joy. But for Lee, it marked the beginning of a new, more complicated battle. One where the man she had come to love was now her cold, vengeful superior, holding the power over her professional life and seemingly determined to torment her for a deception he could not even remember. The dynamic between Lu Fan and Yu underwent a significant and heartwarming transformation. Evolving from professional acquaintances and comic foils into genuinely close friends, their bond forged through shared misadventures and a growing understanding of each other's quirks. Meanwhile, within the corporate environment, the power dynamic between Ming and Lee had shifted into a new, painful phase. As her superior, Ming wielded his authority with a cold precision that felt intentionally punitive. He burdened her with an relentless workload, demanding her presence and labor at all hours, a stark and cruel contrast to the considerate man she had known during his amnesia. Lee endured this professional torment with simmering frustration, her hands tied by her position as his subordinate. This tense atmosphere was further poisoned by the presence of Tia, who, perceiving a threat in Lee, decided to assert her claim. During a lunch break, Tia cornered Lee, her words dripping with false sympathy and veiled threat. "I feel I should be frank with you," Tia began, adopting a conspiratorial tone. "Ming and I are and always have been deeply connected. My feelings for him are profound and enduring. For your own sake, it would be wise to maintain a respectful distance." Lee, already frayed by Ming's treatment, found this interference intolerable. Her retort was sharp and defensive. "You misunderstand the situation entirely. I do not seek his company. He is the one who constantly imposes his presence upon me in a professional capacity. If you have an issue with his behavior, I suggest you address it with him directly. Your grievances are not my concern." In a moment that perfectly illustrated the confusing push and pull between them, Lee later struggled to retrieve a heavy box of files. Without a word, Ming appeared and effortlessly took the weight from her. As he did so, their proximity became intimate, charged with unspoken history. Flustered, Lee stepped back, her voice trembling with a mixture of anger and hurt. "You must keep your distance from me," she insisted, laying her own heart bare in her distress. "I will admit that during the time we lived together under those false pretenses, I developed feelings for you. But that person is gone. The man before me now holds no such place in my heart." Yet when she later needed a specific file for her work, he refused to hand it over, creating another excuse for fraught interaction. Their manager inadvertently witnessed one of these intensely charged, silent standoffs and beat a hasty, embarrassed retreat. Tia, undeterred, resumed her campaign of whispered warnings, pushing Lee to her breaking point. In a burst of impulsive anger, Lee stormed into Ming's private office, bypassing all decorum. "You need to control your fiancé," she exclaimed, her composure shattered. "She persists in harassing me with her insinuations and demands. If you cannot make her understand the boundaries of this professional relationship, then perhaps you should reconsider her involvement here." In her agitation, she gripped the edge of his desk, leaning forward. To her shock, Ming mirrored her action, his hands coming up to cradle her face, his gaze intense and searching. The moment was electrically intimate, a silent battle of wills and unresolved emotions. That evening, in a domestic setting far removed from corporate strife, Ming found a rare moment of peace, giving his younger brother a haircut. The simple, familial act brought them both joy. In this relaxed atmosphere, Ming felt safe enough to voice a vulnerable confession. I find myself developing deep feelings for a woman, he admitted, his usual icy facade melting into one of confused sincerity. But I am at a loss. How does one confess such a thing? His brother, delighted by this glimpse of humanity, enthusiastically offered a flood of romantic advice. The next day at the office, noticing Lee working late yet again, Ming approached her desk. His invitation was stiff but unmistakable. You work tirelessly, you should eat, join me. To her own surprise, Lee agreed. At the restaurant, her attention was caught by a small detail. The button was missing from his shirt cuff. Without overthinking, she removed a simple hairband from her wrist and used it to secure the fabric. This small, instinctive act of care resonated deeply with Ming, an echo of the kindness that had defined their past life together. For a few hours, the walls between them seemed to lower. He fumbled while pouring coffee the next morning, spilling some on her hair. Flustered by his own clumsiness, he grabbed a towel and began gently drying her locks. This tender, utterly unprofessional scene was observed by several staff members, who exchanged knowing, delighted glances before discreetly withdrawing. Lee was mortified by the public display, yet a strange warmth battled with her embarrassment. Later, Ming was seen smiling to himself, a sight so unusual it immediately aroused the manager's suspicions that his boss's heart was undergoing a significant thaw. Lee, meanwhile, became aware of a man who seemed to be lingering near her workplace. Mistaking him for a maintenance worker struggling with a faulty camera, her innate kindness prompted her to offer assistance. Ming, witnessing this from a distance, was seized by a powerful and unfamiliar pang of jealousy. He strode over, extracted Lee from the conversation with a possessive grip, and demanded an explanation. What was the nature of your interaction with that man? Explain yourself. Lee was bewildered by his accusatory tone. I was merely helping someone in need. What is the matter with you? Tia's campaign of interference continued unabated. She began to stage manage appearances, being overly sweet to Lee in Ming's presence, a transparent act designed to portray herself as the gracious victor. The plot thickened when the police brought in the same waiter for questioning, the very man Lee had tried to help. Ever compassionate, Lee approached him to ask if he was all right. Ming, watching this, felt another surge of irrational jealousy. As Lee turned away from the man, she accidentally bumped into Ming, spilling coffee down the front of his expensive coat. She apologized profusely and insisted on taking it to be cleaned as restitution. In a separate subplot, Yu found herself in a precarious situation at a restaurant, harassed by a group of unruly men. Her protector emerged in the unlikely form of Lu Fan, who intervened and took a beating on her behalf. This act of clumsy gallantry marked a turning point in Yu's perception of him. Lee, fulfilling her promise, returned Ming's cleaned coat. As she helped him into it, the domestic intimacy of the gesture overwhelmed her. She hugged him tightly, her voice thick with emotion. The time we shared in the past, I need to forget it. Let us not speak of it again. She then pulled away, said a final goodbye, and left, appearing utterly heartbroken. She had convinced herself a future with the current Ming was impossible, and resolved to purge her memories of the gentle man he had been. That night, her friends provided a distraction, while Ming, restless and lovelorn, sought more advice from his brother on the art of proposing. The narrative took a darker turn as Tia, driven by obsession, discovered Mr. Hao's hiding place. Instead of reporting him, she chose to ally herself with the villain, joining his conspiracy for her own twisted ends. The next morning, the aftermath of the friends' night out was comically chaotic. Yu emerged from a shower to find Lu Fan gazing at her with a newfound, dazed affection. He had undeniably fallen in love. At the office, Ming orchestrated an elaborate scheme. He had the manager fill his office with gifts, which he then presented to a bewildered Lee, claiming they were birthday presents from her colleagues. As she looked around, she noticed unnerving coincidences. His shoes were a matching pair to a style she owned, and beneath his jacket, his shirt was identical to one in her wardrobe. She accepted the gifts with deep suspicion. Ming's grand plan was to corner her in an elevator, shield her from the bustling staff, and confess his love in a private, romantic moment. However, when the elevator doors opened, the staff, seeing their stern boss inside, politely declined to enter, leaving the two alone in a thick, awkward silence. Ming's courage failed him. He could only imagine a bold confession, while in reality he stood mute. Lee could only wonder at his increasingly strange behavior. The subplot reached a poignant moment with the engagement ceremony of Lee Chain and Gin. Yu, heartbroken but resolute, visited Lee Chain with a diary chronicling her long-held crush. Accepting that he could never be hers, she formally said goodbye, choosing to move on with her life. In the main storyline, Lee and Ming attended a meeting with a potential investor, a flamboyant fashion mogul. The woman was immediately taken with Ming's physique and insisted he model for her brand. Despite Lee's protests, Ming was whisked away and pressured to remove his shirt for a fitting. Lee, in a moment of daring, secured the investment deal and then literally rescued a flustered Ming from the situation, pulling him out of the studio. Tia, through her new alliance, received confirmed intelligence that Ming's emotional capacity was severely limited, a fact he hid from the world. This information became a weapon in her arsenal. Back at the office, Ming's attempts to get close to Lee became a source of open amusement for the entire staff. After Lee Chain and Gin's marriage, their first night in a room decorated in overwhelmingly pink romantic flair by his enthusiastic brother was a comedy of mutual awkwardness. One evening, Ming found Lee asleep at her desk. He watched her sleep, his expression soft and full of a care he still could not articulate. His emotional vulnerability, however, was becoming public. News of his emotional outbursts and unusual behavior began to circulate, creating gossip. Lee's father saw the reports and grew deeply worried, fearing for his daughter's heart. Seeing that Lee Chain and Gin had genuinely grown close, the family patriarchs began to conspire, trying to ascertain the true depth of Lee's feelings for Ming. A catalyst arrived when Yu, perhaps mischievously, told Ming that Lee had gone on a blind date. Consumed by jealousy, Ming raced to the location. Lee was actually meeting an investor, but the man was overly forward and tried to grab her hand. Lee's father, who was secretly observing, watched as Ming burst in, violently attacked the man, and defended Lee's honor. Despite his dislike for Ming, Lee's father was silently impressed by this raw display of protective passion. Ming was injured in the scuffle, and Lee tenderly cared for his wounds. This moment of connection was shattered when Ming received a call about his ailing aunt. He took Lee with him to the hospital. There, his aunt, in her pain and grief, verbally attacked Ming for his emotional frigidity. "You cannot even shed a tear for your own departed parents," she accused. "Sometimes I think it would have been better if you had died in that accident." This brutal confrontation broke something within Ming. Overwhelmed, he suffered a panic attack, collapsing on a staircase. Lee rushed to comfort him. In this state of utter vulnerability, as he regained his senses, the words finally tumbled out, a raw, unfiltered confession of his love for her. Lee, her own heart laid bare, whispered her acceptance. They shared a kiss, a union witnessed by a lurking, mysterious figure. Their relationship now public at work, Ming took Lee's hand, confirming the office rumors. However, their newfound happiness was immediately threatened. A news story broke, maliciously exposing Lee's personal history and slandering her mother, falsely claiming she was an unmarried mistress. The revelation devastated Lee, though she put on a brave face for Ming. Her father, horrified by the lies, was compelled to finally reveal the truth. He and Lee's mother had been legally married. Lee's brother provided the marriage certificate, and Lee Chain publicly denounced the false narrative, clearing her mother's name. In the shadows, Tia's obsession reached a dangerous peak. She lured Ming to her apartment and drugged his drink. Her plan was to compromise him and force a connection. Lee, sensing danger, tracked him down and rescued him from Tia's clutches. Tia, left furious and humiliated, swore vengeance. The drug-induced state lowered Ming's inhibitions, and he and Lee shared a night of intimacy, recorded in playful, private videos. The next morning, Ming was radiant, determined to formalize their bond with a marriage proposal. He introduced Lee to his delighted younger brother. In a gesture that blended romance with his characteristic need for control, he presented her with a beautiful pair of earrings, secretly embedded with a tracking device. "Now I will always know where you are," he stated, a statement that was both possessive and protective. As Lee was on her way to finally reconcile with her father, she was ambushed and kidnapped by goons in the employ of Mr. Hao, acting on Tia's orders. When Ming realized she was missing, panic set in. It was the tracking device in the earrings that led him and the police to her location. The kidnappers, however, were tipped off and moved her, delivering her directly to a vengeful Tia. Tia taunted Lee and, in a final, violent act, struck her over the head with a heavy object before the police could intervene. Both Tia and Mr. Hao were apprehended. Lee awoke in her father's home, surrounded by family. In a twist of poetic irony, she pretended to have amnesia, mirroring Ming's earlier condition. Ming, distraught, began to recount their story, even attempting to claim he was her fiancé, just as she had once done to him. This playful ruse soon melted away into tearful recognition and reconciliation. Tia, now imprisoned, faced the consequences of her crimes. Lee's father, his misunderstanding cleared, embraced his daughter with newfound warmth. Ming then lured Lee to a special location, a room filled with genuine, captured photographs of their time together, proving his love was rooted in real moments. A heartfelt letter laid his soul bare. As she read it, he entered and, finding his voice at last, offered a formal, heartfelt marriage proposal, witnessed by her happily observing family. She accepted, and their kiss sealed their future. The story concluded with a glimpse into the futures of all couples. Lee Chain and Gin were contentedly married. Lu Fan and Yu had blossomed into a perfect, loving pair. And finally, Ming and Lee, the once emotionless tycoon and the resilient heroine, were united in marriage, embarking on a life of hard-won happiness, having navigated a labyrinth of deception, danger, and ultimately transformative love.